Do you support raising the minimum wage? Why or why not? If a wage doesn't increase with inflation, the higher-ups are paying you less and less every year. A full-time minimum wage job should allow someone to afford being able to live in the city or town where that job is located. That's bare minimum. The fact that our society has been reduced to needing to spell that out is awful. Sort by controversial if you want to see an answer that isn't yes. I think it should be managed more locally than the federal level. I know this will come as a shock to the economically ignorant that we elect, but the economy of San Francisco, California is just a tad different from Oak Hill, Alabama. It is. The federal government only establishes the bare minimum. States and municipalities can and do establish higher bases. In the US, of course, a full-time minimum wage job should be enough at least for the bare essentials like food and shelter. $7.25 wouldn't even provide that. I've been at the same place for 4 years. They told me I'm capped out, and I don't even make enough to survive at all. Not only should the minimum wage be raised, but a maximum limit should be placed. Nobody should be allowed to take a salary that is more than 10 times what their average employee is paid. That's interesting. I've never thought of it that way. Yeah, like giving someone more money than they will spend in many lifetimes. And then other people are homeless. SMH, I can't believe this country. Yes, it hasn't kept up with inflation, and everyone who works full-time should be able to afford food, rent, healthcare, and transportation. Raise it. A 40-hour minimum wage job after taxes does not cover rent of a one-bedroom apartment where I live. Forget about food, transportation, utilities, clothing, and gas. Maybe something enjoyable from time to time. Oh yeah, I make min wage and have no idea how I'm not homeless. I'm one broke bitch, let me tell ya. I spent 2 years in a trade school to come out with a job in good industry at $16.40 an hour. Not bad. If they raise the minimum to $15, should I be making more then? If 2 years of specialized education does not net me much more than minimum wage, what do I do? Not much, because in all honesty, I would gladly keep working like I do at this pay even if the minimum is $15. That means my friends and family could be making $15. If everyone does better, I do better. I can put my own personal gain aside, because everyone else matters. The future is uncertain and we need to push for the best that we can make of it. On top of that, if you can go to a lower skilled or lower stress job for nearly the same money, the employer is pressured to raise wages to entice people to stay. It gives the worker more power to negotiate, which is always a good thing. In the US, no. Raising the minimum wage at a federal level would be detrimental to the majority of local economies. Things you need to consider are the cost of living in each individual area, a breakdown further than rural and urban. If the cost of rent is in the $400 range, and average utilities cost $30 minus $80, you will see a massive increase in costs across the board with a wage increase. In addition, small towns rely on small business owners and Walmart is miles away. The cost of lease, utilities, and employee wages at higher pay rates would not be sustainable with the number of customers in a town of under 1,000 people. All too often these laws are made by people from major cities, and only applies to those residents. Given that the majority of agriculture and manufacturing, both higher-paying jobs, are done in areas with lower cost of living, this would result in a major loss of labor force. Urban areas being consumers, they'd be forced to either pay for bailouts or imports. You can't demand a service and then not give those people a living wage. Giant corporations like Walmart don't pay a living wage and then their employees require government assistance, food stamps, welfare, etc. As taxpayers we end up picking up the slack that corporations are pocketing for themselves. So yes, raise the minimum wage. But that action within itself is not enough. It's just easy to fit on a sign, I guess. Raising the minimum wage won't affect Walmart. Their starting wage is already well above federal minimums. No, because then I would have to pay my servants more. Had to be that guy. Won't the price of everything just go up? Employee wages aren't the only cost for a product. The price may increase but it's not nearly at the same proportions. Increasing the wage to $15 per hour isn't going to make everything cost double. Absolutely. Minimum wage should rise with the cost of living but it has fallen far behind. Absolutely, because the idea that there are a large number of companies out there that would pay their workers less if they were legally allowed to is disgusting. And for small businesses that couldn't stay in business if they had to pay the people who work for them more, fuck them. They shouldn't be in business in the first place. Edit. Small businesses that can't afford to pay a living wage to the people who keep it afloat, and large businesses that won't pay a living wage to the people who keep them afloat don't provide the essential services to the communities they exist in. That isn't anti-business, that's anti-toxic business. Business shouldn't be the goal of a community, survival of the community should be the goal of that community. Greater than. And for small businesses that couldn't stay in business if they had to pay the people who work for them more, fuck them. They shouldn't be in business in the first place. I don't think people will start cheering on hating companies when they become homeless due to government policies. If a company can't afford to pay its workers enough to live on, it shouldn't be in business. That'd make it hard to start a business to compete in any way with, say, Apple, Amazon, Walmart, Google, etc. We'd find no more mom-and-pop shops, just Walmart Minis and Taco Bells. To be simplistic, yes, of course, it's a no-fucking-brainer. I mean, everything else is permitted to increase: rent, fuel, food, electric and gas, clothing, everything. Why not wages? Wages are permitted to increase, they just aren't mandated to. Because I understand economics enough to not believe every sensationalist headline I read. Raising the minimum wage to $20 wouldn't create noticeable inflation, let alone $15. Absolutely, many jobs deal with way too much crap to be making minimum wage. Me too. I honestly am wondering why some people are so against it. The wage used to be tied to inflation. If it still was, we would be at $20-something an hour. When people get paid more, they spend it on things they need, which is great for the economy. I mean, seriously, I know some people who are so against it. WHYYY. Unfortunately, where I live, minimum wage went up to $15. It didn't matter because the price of everything went up alongside it, pretty much. I've seen people charge $1,700 for single bedrooms, no utilities. Average without utilities included is about $1,300 for one bedroom, $1,400 to $1,500 for two. Really sad. The thing is, the price of everything goes up regardless of minimum wage. Minimum wage has been the same and still prices increase. Yes, absolutely. The whole intent behind the federal minimum wage was that this was the minimum, full-time wages you needed to earn to live off of. I'm not talking about buying the latest iPhone or a $60,000 car, but enough to live above the poverty line. A lot of conservatives I know, my brother included, feel that minimum wage equals minimum skill and thus are really only meant for high school folks. Never mind the fact that it's not a high school kid serving you coffee at 630 am or handing you value meal at the drive-thru at lunchtime. In the end, raising minimum wage only helps people. Less government handouts and all that. Yeah, we definitely need to raise minimum wage because it doesn't match the minimum living standards in many states. But minimum wage isn't what's wrong with our economy. The true sickness is the fact that so many people need to rely on minimum wage. Back then minimum wage was only for teenagers and young adults, now many people require it to live. I blame the problem on the fact that today we are primarily a service-based economy. We pushed away high-paying manufacturing jobs because we keep buying cheaper products. Maybe minimum wage wasn't high enough back then? Today's America looks nothing like the American dream Republicans think so fondly of 60 years ago. Yes. Housing, utilities, and healthcare are incredibly expensive and getting worse. If someone has to work over 40 hours or multiple jobs just to survive, the system isn't working. Yes. It's too low. Yes. If McDonald's in Denmark can pay people $28 an hour, $15 shouldn't be controversial. That's a whole different country, dude. Absolutely. There is no real argument for not raising the minimum wage. Numerous studies have shown improvements in work productivity and improvements to the economy as a whole. In a way, not a blanket amount. $15 an hour in Arkansas has you living high on the hog. $15 in California is peanuts. Wages should reflect the state's cost of living. 7.25 is too low for anyone though. I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done, both in public and private sector. Minimum wage raises to business makes less money to business, raises prices to cover deficit to things cost more to people can't afford things to minimum wage goes up. Show this happening in any country that has $20 plus minimum wages. Ever. Minimum wage should be tied to the Consumer Price Index and adjusted annually. No. Raising the minimum wage is like putting a band-aid on a stab wound. It doesn't do anything to fix the issues of the horrible living expenses that cause minimum wage to not be enough. We need massive economic reform so that we don't have to keep raising the minimum wage for people to live. A state's minimum wage should increase at the rate and time state reps get their automatic raises. I support raising the minimum wage, yes. I also support more workplaces transitioning into a 4-day work week. There is a lot of unemployment, but a lot of people who find themselves overworked. Aren't those very odd problems that exist together? So it's not just about income inequality, it's about labor inequality. One might explain that the labor inequality exists because some people are not skilled for certain positions, and that's fair too. But I also support tuition-free educations. What's the worst thing that could happen if we educated too many people? Seems like we'd run into fewer issues than being undereducated as a society. I think these things are all interrelated. It's about setting up conditions for people to be more likely to succeed. I agree completely with everything you just said. Something tells me we would get along great lol. It is not ideal in terms of ways to increase worker living standards since artificial price setting always creates inefficiencies. However, we don't live in an efficient market as is. Workers do not have a lot of ways to increase their earning power due to things like lack of collective bargaining and automation pretty much obsoleting a lot of people's skill sets. So in the absence of a better option, I support minimum wage increase fully.
Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.